My name is Bronwyn. I am a consulting astrologer and astrology teacher and mentor to aspiring pro astrologers. And working with the moon is kind of like home for me. I have my natal moon is in Cancer in the second house, conjunct the North Node and Venus at 0 degrees. So she's the final dispositor in my chart. It's really all about the moon for me. So I love sharing moon wisdom. I think it's the most beautiful entry point into astrology. And even if you just stay in the doorway to astrology in that space of moon wisdom, understanding the phases of the moon, her movement through the signs over the course of the months, understanding the psychology of your moon sign, there is so much wisdom just in that knowledge. So I'm always really happy to show up and introduce people to moon wisdom because it's life enhancing. It truly is. Working with the moon helps us to connect with natural cycles. It helps us to connect more deeply with our own emotions, memories, psyche, intuition. And like I said, it's a beautiful entry point into the art of astrology. So this is what happens every month. The moon is breathing light as she moves through her phases. And where we sit now, actually where we sit now today, there's a little sliver of silver gold just on that edge of the moon. And we're just starting that in-breath of the month. So that's a beautiful meditation to take with you, to begin to, this is a really simple way to connect with those phases of the moon and to begin to understand those two halves of the waxing and waning, and how many of our own cycles, our own biological cycles, our own creative cycles, resemble that waxing and waning of the moon, just as our breath does. We start at the bottom of the breath, emptied out that dark face of the moon, and breathe in the fullness till we're holding that light, and then release it back to the new moon. This is what the new moon does every month. She's breathing light. You want to connect more deeply with the moon. This is such a beautiful place to be. The moon is magical, and something in us knows about that magic, and something in us yearns to connect more deeply with that cycle. I think part of that yearning is our desire to connect more deeply with the peace of natural cycles, with the honoring of the out-breath as much as the in-breath. There's something in us that wants to return to that honoring of rest as much as we honor action, of feeling connected to the natural world. So we're drawn to this study of moon wisdom. So you're here to connect with the moon. And I'm here to remind you that you are already connected. You're connected in your in-breath and out-breath. You're connected in the pull of gravity. This is our nearest celestial body, and we can see her pull in the oceans. We're all always connected to the moon. We're connected to that light at night. The full moon may keep us up at night. We may sleep a little bit better in the dark of the moon, like where we're sitting today. And all of you have a memory, probably many, but one memory that could float to the surface right now that's a potent or beautiful or simple life memory that involves the moon. Maybe it's a memory of riding in the car when you were little, and that first time when you realize, oh, the moon is always following me. Maybe it's a memory of celebrating a beautiful celebratory night where the full moon was there over the water or over whatever your landscape is, and that became part of the celebration. Maybe it's a memory, an early memory of looking out of your window and seeing the moon and understanding her constancy and feeling supported by her in some mysterious way, even when you were going through something difficult. We all have memories that pull in the moon, and the moon astrologically holds that capacity of memory. So think about what we've already talked about. This is the astrological moon. Memory, connection, the body, the in-breath and out-breath, the cycling of our bodies, of our psyche, of our moods. All of those things are what are expressed in the astrological moon. And all of those things are part of what we yearn to connect more deeply with when we yearn to connect with the astrological moon. When I do a live workshop, I'll start with a circle where we all share a memory of the moon, and they all have things in common. Usually they're emotional elements of togetherness, or sometimes of loneliness, elements of support, elements of beauty, elements of connection and mystery and awe. So once again, just to think about why do we connect with the moon? We connect with the moon because she teaches us about cyclical time. We live in a culture that honors linear time, but our bodies and the natural world around us honor cyclical time. And the moon helps us to remember what that is. We did this with the little breath exercise. She reminds us that it's okay to come back to the same place again and again and have it be just a little bit different. Something we can often beat ourselves up about in life, of like, oh, here I am again. But the moon reminds us that that's the nature of life. We come back again and again to the same place for a reason. And it's okay to begin again and again, just as the moon does every month. The moon teaches us to balance activity with dormancy and rest. Boy, we could all use that reminder, right? Because again, we live in a culture that honors activity and productivity and progress, not so much honoring gestation and rest and renewal. So she's a wonderful reminder that we need more of that in our lives. And she connects us to the natural world, to our own bodies, the cycling of our own bodies, and to many of the biological processes that we see around us, as well as psychological and creative processes that follow that waxing and waning. So she's a beautiful bridge to the natural world, to the study of astrology, and to our own cyclicality. Okay, I have slides. So we're going to talk about this moon in Gemini. So that's where we are. We're under this. Moon now has moved on to the sign of Cancer, her home sign, emotional Cancer, but she was new at 26 degrees of Gemini on Saturday. So what is a new moon in general? A new moon is when the sun and the moon come together. They do this once a month. The moon laps the sun, right? The sun takes a whole year to go around the zodiac. The moon takes just a month. So she's going to meet up with the sun once a month. They meet up at the same degree of the same sign. They do this once a month when they are in conjunction. That is, by definition, a new moon. We don't see the moon because she's in the arms of the sun. That's literally astronomically what's happening. We're not able to see her because of her relationship with the sun. So astrologically, that new moon is the beginning of a new 29-day cycle. We all know that, right? It's the lunar month. But it's also the beginning of a new 2.5-year cycle if you follow the longer lunar gestational cycle. So every new moon is the beginning of a new 2.5-year cycle. It's not realistic to track all of those, but that's why you watch the sign and degree of the new moon, because if this new moon, any particular new moon, is hitting something important in your chart, you know that you are renewing, you're heading into a new 2.5-year cycle that you'll be able to track along that degree of the new moon. So emotionally, psychologically, even physically, the new moon is a clean slate. It's an energetic reset. It's a chance to rest, even just for a couple of days, and a chance to begin again. And I love that about the new moon. It's like that fresh New Year's or Monday morning. I don't know, not everybody loves a Monday morning feeling, but I love the feeling of like a whole new period of time that's fresh. Like I get a do-over every month. So I love that clean slate feeling of the new moon. And it's a magical time of fertile darkness. So we're resting in the dark of lunar consciousness during that new moon. There's so much potential to grow new things in that fertile darkness. And it's also a step for us in a longer developmental cycle. So the new moon is all of that. It's a chance to tap into a shorter cycle and a longer cycle within us. It's a chance to rest in the fertile darkness and dream up whatever's coming next for us. So some ways that we can celebrate the new moon and tap into that fresh new beginning: rest and reset. I always try to take, I'm actually breaking my own rule today because I usually take a week of no meetings, either in balsamic or new moon week. I'm still working. I'm just not doing this. But I wanted to get together with you guys and do some new moon work. So here we are. But if you can take a rest, even just for that day of the new moon, or most especially the day before, think of resting with the moon. It's a beautiful time for that, even if that's the only thing you do to celebrate the new moon. It's also lovely to take time for simple ceremony. What is simple ceremony? I'm going to show you in just a minute. And it can be really simple. I'm a kitchen witch, right? That means I like us to use what we have on hand. We don't have to get fancy or ceremonial. The magic is within us. So we'll look at that in a minute. We can journal. New moon journaling is wonderful. We can journal about what we want for the next month, what we want for the next 2.5 years. We can journal on the lunar key. So the lunar keys are a set of questions that I've created for each phase of the moon. And the lunar key for the new moon is what is being conceived. What I love about this question is it puts us in a sort of place of co-creation with the universe. Instead of saying, what do I want? We say, what is beginning in my life? What do I feel is being conceived right now? So that, as a journal prompt, sometimes gives rise to something really interesting that we'll watch grow over the coming cycle. So obviously we set intentions. This is a powerful practice to do on the new moon, to use that growing light and that in-breath to ride that slipstream of the light into what's next for us. So we can set intentions for the next 29 days or for the next 2.5 years. If you're creative and you like a hands-on visual, something to do, you can create a little new moon altar or create a new moon vision board. So every new moon, you could choose one of these things to do and do it according to the sign the moon is in or according to your own mood, because the moon rules our moods. Even if it's just taking a rest on the dark of the moon, that's a beautiful way to honor the moon. So what about the new moon in Gemini? So every month, the new moon is new in a different sign. Over the course of the year, we move through every sign of the zodiac. It makes sense, right? Because as we just talked about, the moon comes to meet the sun, and the sun is in a sign for 1 month. So during that month, when the moon comes to meet the sun, she'll be in the same sign as the sun. So we work through the zodiac over the course of the year. So we're sitting here now under a new moon in Gemini because it's Gemini season. The sun is in Gemini. Gemini is a mutable air sign. So we're thinking about our verbal capacity, our intellectual capacity. What do we associate with air? It's the mind and the idea of balance, expansiveness, freedom, the rapid movement of thoughts and nerve impulses are all very Gemini. Mutable, the mutable signs are the ones that are tipping into the next season. They're where we change the energy of the seasons. So mutable air, that's Gemini. For a mutable air moon, we want to set our new moon intentions around Gemini things. This is not an exhaustive list of Gemini things, but it's a few to get you started. We can set intentions around our communication, around our learning and or our teaching. We could set intentions around healing anxiety. If we own a business, we could set intentions around our marketing. Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, takes care of that for us. He also is the magical planet, so we can set intentions about our magical life. We can set intentions around our habits of thinking, our ingrained patterns of thought, shifting our habits and neural pathways, shifting our self-talk, that kind of thing. Great intention setting under a Gemini moon. If we're doing writing and speaking for something in our lives, this is a great time to set intentions around that. I'm going to finish that book. I'm going to become an excellent speaker. If we have physical healing to do, Gemini and Mercury rule the hands, the arms, and the lungs. So we can work towards healing of those parts of the body. And Gemini is our relationship with the people we stand side by side with. So we can set intentions around our relationships with our siblings, our neighbors, our cohorts, our co-workers, our roommates, those kinds of people in our lives. sibling-like relationships. And what about this moon in particular, this new moon in Gemini in 2023? Because every Gemini moon would be the same, but they're not, of course, because they're falling into a different set of transits each year. And so they can carry very different energies depending on that. So this particular moon landed on the degree of 26 Gemini. So it's wake, and this is for those of you that are a little more advanced in your astrology. If you don't know what this is, it's okay, just let it wash over you. There'll be a part later where I show you how to find it in your life and chart. But if you know where that is, 26 Gemini in your chart, or any of your 25, 26, or 27 degree placements, especially of mutable signs, those are the places in your chart that are woken up by this moon. Those are the places where you will be experiencing new beginnings and dynamic change. So this new moon was square Neptune, and that encourages us to take dynamic action, the square, to make your dreams, Neptune, come true by speaking about them, writing them down, doing marketing actions, whatever Gemini actions you can take to work towards your dreams. That's why I'm saying write them down, right? Gemini loves words. So if we take that wordless realm of Neptune and work with that dreamy wordless realm by doing our best to articulate it, we can really move forward towards a big dream under this new moon. Something that made the energy of this moon a little bit tricky is the fact that Saturn, who is now in Pisces, stationed retrograde for the next 5 or 6 months, stationed retrograde on the day of the new moon. So the feeling there, and I think this is maybe one of the dominant moods of this moon, let me know if you've been feeling this. The feeling is that there's a part of you that's racing ahead, like your mind is so full of ideas and so excited about getting started with this and getting started with that and ready to move ahead. Yet there is part of you that feels maybe even discouraged, but it doesn't need to be that extreme. It could just be a part of you that feels slowed down, held back, a little bit more patient, and you may be going back to take responsibility or do completions around something that started in March, or even back to late 2020, December of 2020. So if you've been feeling a little bit pulled in 2 directions, I think that's really natural under these energies, that Gemini moon is really firing us up and pulling us forward. And yet Saturn is saying, well, okay, hold on though. You have some responsibilities, some unfinished business, some structures that need to be in place before you can really get going with this dream. Let me know in the comments if you've been experiencing this. And the times you want to think back to, if you are experiencing that feeling, are what was going on in early March of this year, 2023, that you would like to look back on. And even before that, what was happening in December of 2020, because that's actually when Saturn and Jupiter met up, and we're at a new stage in that journey. So those are the structures and responsibilities that are pulling you back while this Gemini moon pulls you forward. Journal about it. Again, like this Gemini, let's use our words to sort through things. So finally, this new moon was conjunct Juno. So Juno is one of our beautiful asteroid goddesses, and Juno speaks to how we partner. She also has a lot to do with the conventional roles that we play. So it can be really interesting to work with her sometimes around a typical role that we've taken on that isn't working for us anymore. So with that conjunction with Juno, we can think about who or what do you want to partner or collaborate with to get your ideas, Gemini, out into the world. Or we can think about where do you need to own your power in a relationship and maybe step out of a role that doesn't feel authentic to you anymore in order to really express your authentic self in that relationship. Okay, so now we get to what I think is the juicy stuff, which is talking about what to do under a new moon. And I think that creating a simple moon altar, whether you do this for the new or the full moon, can be a really powerful practice because it's a pattern interrupter in our daily life, right? It's consciously taking some time out of our day-to-day and engaging in a creative, sacred practice. And again, this doesn't have to be fancy. In fact, I really encourage you to use this concept of kitchen magic and use the things that you already have in your home, in your life, little ordinary objects. I think there's something powerful about this practice of so-called kitchen magic because it helps us to remember that the ordinary is sacred and that our daily lives are infused with magic. If we use ordinary objects as magical implements, it reminds us of that. So creating a new moon altar, and those of you that have worked with me before, you know that I like to use a little dish or tray or plate to create your altar for all kinds of reasons. One is practicality. Okay, I have 4 planets in Taurus. I'm highly practical, even in my spirituality. And if you have small children in the house, or if you don't want to put your spiritual practices, out in the open for everyone who comes to visit to see, it's great to make these portable. So you can move them around and put them in a private place or put them up high. Take them into the room that you're in. So a beautiful little tray. And on that little tray, this is for your personal new moon ceremony. The altar building is itself a ceremonial act. So just going around your house and finding those beautiful objects and then arranging them on your little tray or dish in a way that you find pleasing and beautiful, just that simple act is a ceremony in itself. So traditionally an altar, and this is across all kinds of traditions, traditionally an altar contains certain things like flowers and candles, elements of the beauty of the natural world, an element of flame for spirit. Traditionally, altars often contain references to the 4 elements or the 4 directions. So you can make a very, very simple traditional altar with 5 things: something for earth, something for fire, something for air, something for water, and something for center or spirit. And that can be anything meaningful. If you're working to build a little new moon altar, you might choose the center to be something that represents your goal for that moon or a quality of that moon in Gemini. But it can also be an image of what you consider to be the divine, or an image of spirit, or anything that represents that mystery. Anything at all that's important to you. It could be a photo of a loved one, it can be anything. For Earth, this can be really simple. It can be like a beautiful crystal, like what I've shown here in this slide, but it can also be like, some of my favorite things to use are just a really simple little beach stone, something that I've picked up on the beach. It doesn't have to be fancy. If you're in a pinch, no pun intended, it's Gemini, you can use a little bowl of salt, just the salt from your kitchen. It's very magical substance, and you can use that to represent Earth. Even a handful of earth from your garden. So don't let having the right thing stop you. Something to represent Earth. The easiest thing for fire is a little candle, just a little tea light. If you live somewhere where you can't have open flame, you can get one of those little battery powered candles. Representation works fine. Air, people often, it's a little more abstract, right? So people often ask me, what can I use for air? A feather, if you have one, a picture of a feather, a picture of a bird. Little pieces of paper are symbolic of the air signs. Gemini loves paper. So you're going to have just little pieces of paper, pretty paper, maybe some origami paper, or maybe just like something torn out of your memo book. Again, kitchen magic. If you like to burn something or diffuse something, you can use that, because the sense of smell belongs to air. So incense or a feather, diffused oil, anything like that. For water, I just always use a beautiful little dish of water. That's it, very simple. Or you can use a seashell or a picture of the ocean. And again, center can be any meaningful symbol or object. For Earth, you can also bring in flowers or plants. Sometimes I use some flowers for center. So by now you've made a really beautiful arrangement. You can go ahead and add whatever else you want. You can add objects to represent your new moon intentions. You can add things that you want to work on over the next month. You can add pictures of the people that you're thinking of. You can add an oracle card that really speaks to the energy that you're creating. But this is the basis, just to start with these 5 things. On a little dish, there you have it, a simple new moon altar. And now that what you've done now by pulling together these 4 directions is you have created sacred space. You have, in the most simple terms, drawn a magic circle. And now you can sit within that circle that you've created and engage with the energy of the moon. And one of the best ways that I know to do this, and especially under an air moon, is journaling. You can have a dedicated new moon journal, or you can use your regular journal or grab a piece of paper, kitchen magic. And you can journal about whatever you want to begin. What do you want to create in the next 2.5 years or the next 29 days around Gemini things? Or if you know your chart, around the Gemini house in your chart. Or you can use as a prompt that lunar key that I've given you, what is being conceived. But the point really is to spend that contemplative time with yourself. If you're not into journaling, you can use that time for prayer and meditation. You could listen to a beautiful yoga nidra meditation or a guided meditation or just some soothing music, and take the time for meditation and contemplation. The idea is to take the time for yourself to see what comes in. Especially under a new moon, that idea of what is being intended for me. If I really check in with myself, not with my long list of goals, but with what my heart really wants for this next phase, you've carved out this time for yourself in sacred space to really check in and think about what's beginning in your life and what you want to begin in your life if you strip everything else away and sit in that sacred space. That's why I like the what is being conceived, because it kind of opens it up for the universe to speak to you. But you can also use that time to write manifestation lists. It's your ceremony. It's up to you. Something that people often ask me is like, when is the best time? You can do this new moon ceremony anytime between the new moon, and you want to look at that time because you don't want to be doing this under the balsamic moon, the ending of the old cycle. You want to make sure it's after the hour of the new moon. But after that, you have a week, anytime before the first quarter moon. The way I learned it, you'll have 3 signs of the moon during that week. Look at the closing aspects of the moon and choose the one that fits and do your ceremony then. Another thing to think about is, how much control do I want over this from my will and my ego? Wait till the moon takes more light if you want to be more specific in your manifestation. If you really just want to open up to the mystery, then do it really close to the dark of the moon. It's kind of gives you the option of how much do you want to collaborate with the mystery, and how much do you like surprises from the universe. The more you're willing to collaborate and just ask what's intended for you, you want to take that to the darker time. If you really want to just sit down and write a very clear manifestation list because you know what you want, then wait till she takes a little bit of light. So you're looking at this slide and you're going, but I don't know what my Gemini house is. How do I know what I want to create if I don't know what that is? So your chart is divided into 12 houses, and each house rules a different area of life. So this is a really simple shorthand way to figure out what's going on for you specifically under any transit really, but under any given new moon. So here's the really simple way to do this via whole sign houses. I've given you the chart right here for the Gemini new moon. So you look at the signs on the left-hand side of this chart. That's not your sun sign, okay? That's your ascendant or your rising sign. So to figure this out, you have to know what your rising sign is. And then look at your rising sign and then All right, so I'm looking down, I'm a Gemini ascendant. So I know this moon is falling in my first whole sign house of my identity, my name, my authenticity, myself, my body, how I interface initially with the world. So find your rising sign here and find what house this Gemini new moon is falling into for you. And you know that that is the area of your life that you're going to be focusing on for this cycle, for this 29-day cycle. And if you have important placements there for this next 2.5-year cycle. And for those of you who are wondering like, oh, but wait, I know that 26 Gemini is actually in my second house. There's different house systems. This is an easy way to do it because the whole sign is one house. Here's some Gemini wisdom for you. It all works. There can be two truths. There can be two house systems that both work equally well. Gemini is all about not resolving dualities, but understanding that there's always multiple ways to look at an issue and indeed multiple truths. So now that you know what sign that moon has fallen into for you, your Gemini house, you can do your ceremony and do your journaling. What do I want to create in the next 2.5 years in my, whichever house it is, in my first house of self-identity and body, in my 6th house of daily life, wellness, and pets, and so on. Thank you for taking time out of your Monday, Moon Day, to celebrate the moon with me. I hope I've given you some fun tools to work with. Remember, you have till like the end of the week, the Virgo moon, to do your new moon intention setting. And gosh, I appreciate you guys so much. This is some of my favorite part of my work, to show up and see your shining faces. So thank you so much for being here. Bye for now. Thank you so much.